Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're hailing from. Welcome to another episode of the Developer Experience Office Hours here on OpenShift TV. It is a Tuesday. It is the second Tuesday of the month, or second or last Tuesday of the month? I don't even know what Tuesday it is anymore. What day is it? What year is it? But we are joined by the one and only Serena Nichols, aka Serena from the future. And we are going to be discussing some new things with the OpenShift connector for VS Code. I use this tool all the time. I'm excited to hear more about it and some of the new things in it. So, Serena, why don't you introduce our host of characters and take it away?
Sure. My name's Serena Nichols. I'm one of the PMs in OpenShift developer tooling, and oftentimes talking about what's coming in the future. Although today we are talking about something that is released and you can get your hands on right away. I will pass it over to Mohit, who's going to be doing the demo for us as well.
Hey, thanks, Serena. So, hi guys. Today, the main focus of the show is how OpenShift connector will provide a seamless developer experience around different tools, what things we have improved, what new features you guys will get to experience, and a short demos around it. So, I hope everything will work and we can start with that. So, what do you, Chris?
Yeah, and I would like to introduce the one and only Ryan Jarvinen, who is here to answer any questions you may have. He will be monitoring chat, and I, of course, will be around to answer any questions you have as well. So thank you all for joining us today. And Ryan, if you want to introduce yourself, feel free.
Hey, give me a shout out in chat, and definitely, as always, we want this show to be interactive, and the purpose is to be here to answer your questions and to act as an office hours. If you have topics that you would like to see in the future, definitely pester me in the chat, please.
Yes, or myself, or like just the chat in general. Throw out your ideas, and we'll pick them up. Trust me. All right, Mohit, you've got a brand new MacBook with all kinds of fun stuff on it. I'm excited. Let's do it, man. Let's show this stuff off. Let's do it.
Okay, yeah. So let me just quickly share the screen and we'll get started.
Oh yeah, the screen share. The joy of screen sharing. It worked earlier. Will it work now? Here we go.
Okay.
I think I can. There we go. Okay. Ta-da.
Yeah. So if you go to VS Code Marketplace and you search for OpenShift or you search for Kubernetes, this is the extension which will be prompted to you. And currently we have the new release 0.2.0. Basically, it supports Odoo 2.0 and it has a support for dev file. Previously, the deployment for OpenShift components was supported only using S2I components. But with this brand new release of the extension, it will also support dev file components. And that is one of the cool features which we have and we'll be demoing today. The other cool stuff is we also have a new release of Red Hat Code Ready containers, which is going to support OpenShift 4.5.14. And this week, we are also going to do a new release for it. So you might get a chance to experience OpenShift 4.6 cluster directly running from your extension itself on your local system. So that will be pretty exciting. And I hope we'll have more feedback around it. So one more thing, what we have added for this is this extension is also available on OpenVSX registry. So for users who are going to use it on Che TI editors, so this extension can be directly downloaded from OpenVSX registries. The release is similar what we have on the VS Code Marketplace. So the experience will be exactly similar. And the idea is whatever new releases we are going to have in the future weeks, the extension will be available on both places, VS Code Marketplace and on the OpenVSX registries.
That's awesome.
Cool. So I'll just move on to the demo part. So this is the VS Code editor. And if you go into this extensions place and you just search OpenShift here, you see this is the extension which is being prompted. We just have to install it. And once the extension is installed, if you go here and you see, this is the icon which will be shown on the panel, which means that, okay, extension is there ready and you can use it. So the idea here for this demo is we are going to showcase that how you can quickly deploy any application, be it on Node.js, be it on Java, or be it on Python, using dev file directly on OpenShift cluster. The experience will be similar that how you deploy on a dev file or how you deploy a S2I component. So let's quickly start and connect to an OpenShift cluster just for the sake of demo so that things don't break up. I have already connected to an OpenShift instance here, which is uh, running remotely. You can also go ahead and create a new OpenShift cluster directly from core-ready containers. You just have to do add OpenShift cluster, and that will open a new view here. And you just have to create a refresh cluster. And if you, I don't think the screen is that, okay. So the current version on the extension is 1.16.0, but as I mentioned, the release which is going to happen this week will have 1.17.0, and the OpenShift version for that will be 4.5.14. But if all goes well, we might also have 4.6 release, but that depends on the release cycle of Red Hat Core containers. But the idea is whatever will be the latest release, that will be supported by the extension completely, so that users can quickly test out local clusters and start with it. Cool. So I'll just start with any remote OpenShift cluster. So I'm already connected to it. And the idea here is I will deploy a simple Node.js application. Uh, it can be any application using React, using Angular, or any other framework. So it doesn't vary a lot that, okay, if it's a React application, will the experience be different, or will it an Angular application, will the experience be different? The idea here is uh, we have the configuration on dev file. Once the configuration is there, any application which is supported can be directly deployed on any OpenShift cluster. And the most important part for this release is previously we used to only support OpenShift clusters, but from this release going forward, we also support Kubernetes, raw Kubernetes cluster. So it's just not OpenShift anymore. It's OpenShift and Kubernetes together with this extension. So whatever experience you want to have on OpenShift will also be there on core Kubernetes cluster also. Cool. So just start with the demo. I'll just go ahead and create a new project. I'll say Twitch demo. Okay. So once I go here, so this is the new project which I'm already logged in into. We also have an option where if your cluster has multiple projects and you need to switch between different projects, you just have to change your active project and it will basically list down the list of different projects you have. You just select it and the context of your project will automatically change. Right. So this is the new project I have created. I'll just go ahead and do a new component. So before creating a new component, it will prompt me to provide an application name. So I'll just say application demo. Now there are three different ways where we can create a component. So I'll just select the workspace directory. We can also directly pass a Git repository or a binary file or a zip folder or whatever we need to deploy in a cluster. But for demo, I'll just be using workspace directory. Okay, so I already have a folder in my workspace where I want to create my dev file. So I'll just select that. Once that is selected, I'll showcase you what the repository contains and what are the files inside it and how we can uh, check the dev file configuration directly on top of it. So the component name is, let me just save is at COVID-19, because that is the simple application which we have created just to showcase different rates of COVID cases across the globe. I understand that's not a good scenario currently in the world, but we have to adjust to it. So I'll go ahead and do this. Now the fun part comes here. Previously, the different type of components which were allowed to be created using the OpenShift extension was just the S2I build images. So if you see the list which have been provided have been marked separately for S2I images. And if you go down, you can see there are different dev file components also which being supported. So now this is a Node.js application. So I'll just select Node.js dev file support. And you see a new component is getting created. So now as the component is already created, it asks me, do I need to push the component? Because this component currently is in the local state. It is not yet pushed. So I'll not do push right now. I'll push later. So now if you go to the workspace folder, so this is the repository which is already there. Now, if you see, there's a dev file.yaml file which is created, because this gets created as soon as I create this component. In that dev file.yaml, if you see, all the configurations are mentioned, that on what's the endpoint which is there, what should be the first command which it runs, and what should be the executable commands that it should do npm start or something. So this is specific to Node project. If it's a Java project, it will have different Maven configurations. And if it's a Python project, it will have different Python bundles to be executed. So basically this dev file is supported, so that once you have this dev file based configuration, it can be shared across to different editors, and the experience will be same throughout. Say if you're using in Eclipse or you are using any T editor, that support should also be there. So once we have this dev file.yaml file, and you see there's a .odo folder which gets created, and which basically will have all your name of the components. So what is the name of the component, under which project it is, and what is the name of the application. So this is basically the environment which gets created in the YAML and .odo folder inside your repository. So once we commit this code on GitHub, it can be shared across to different users. So different teams who are working on the same repository can use the same configuration and just quick start their development process. So basically enhancing the quick way of running your application, testing it on OpenShift and seeing if everything works smoothly. So once we have this thing there, I'll go back to my this uh, component here. So if you see, if I extend this component, this was the name of the component, and we also label it as dev file to just separate it, that okay, it's a dev file component or a S2I component. Now, if you see the dev file, as I mentioned, it already has a URL mapped to it. So basically the URL, it will be running on port 3000 with the HTTP mapping. Now, once we do push command, the idea here is whatever configuration which was there in the dev file will be directly pushed to the OpenShift cluster, which is running here, which I'm connected to. So if you see, it says that validating the dev file. Once it is validated, it will start creating the Kubernetes resources on the OpenShift cluster. Once the Kubernetes resources have been created, it will also push the URLs which is needed to open that component. So we'll just wait for that process to finish. It might take some time because it is trying to push the components to a remote cluster, which is hosted in, I guess, US Eastern. So once that thing is completed, we'll have a better look at how that component looks and what the UI. So the basic idea is, however complex your repository is. So if you see this workspace, it's an entire React application which has different APIs, which are different components. It's using different cards, different charts. It has different mappings. It has multiple images to be loaded. But the idea here is, as a development team, we should not worry that whether the application is too complex or how is it. The idea is to just be quickly able to deploy that application on OpenShift and test it, that does it work seamlessly or not. So it can be a simple Node.js application, or it can be a very complex React application who does communication throughout the server and integrates with different like charts, 3D mapping, and everything else. And this experience is similar if we are also trying to deploy any component using dev file support for Java or any dev file support for Python. So once this command is finished, I'll show you what are the different type of registries or the components which are being supported currently. So if you see, the changes are successfully pushed to the component and the status of the component has been changed to push. So once this is there, you can see the number of commands which we have for the component have increased. Now you can open directly in the browser, or you can watch also. So if I do a watch for this, if you see, this basically will open a watch session here. So this is one of the improvements on the UI. You can directly see what watch sessions are currently running for your component. So once you have this watch session, it has a separate view. And if we need to do a debug of it, it will basically, currently the debug support is not there for dev files, because the idea here is we need to make sure whatever components we are running with S2I images and dev file should be having the same experience with debug. So the debug for S2I works seamlessly, but we need to make sure that the same experience what we have for S2I is for dev file. So for this 0.2.0 release, debug feature is not there, but as I mentioned, we have a release coming up this week. So once that is there, we'll have a debug support for Java, Node.js, and Python components. So that is something I think people will be excited about to explore it around once they use this dev file support. And once the debug session is active, you will see there's a debug session view over here. So those whatever debug which is running will be mentioned over here the same way as we have the watch session view over here. So this is basically to segregate different actions which are available for the components. So this is basically the Explorer view where you see all the listing, the tree view support. This is where the watch sessions are, and this is where the debug is. So now we have our application deployed. So let's just open it on the browser and see how it looks. So if you see, I have done, it's a very simple workflow. I have a Git repository which has been cloned into my system. I just use a dev file configuration and just deployed into OpenShift. And once I open it, fingers crossed, everything should work. And yay.
There we go.
So if you see,
Oh,
Looks
this
good.
is a simple.
yeah, that looks really impressive and sad all
Yep.
at the
So,
same
Yes.
and this basically
time.
this basically does a lot of communication from the backend. So I would say this is the very latest data which we have for COVID-19. And this, if you see, this is a very this tries to integrate with different scenarios. Like you have charts, you have graphs, and you also have like search. For example, let's say what's the status in France for COVID-19 today. And if you see, the number of infected cases, the recovered cases, and the death ratios have been dynamically, these are changing. So if you see the integration which is there on your repository, it need not be changed when you're trying to deploy any application on OpenShift or any Kubernetes cluster. You just have to provide the dev file configuration and just push it on the cluster, and that's it. And this works like for any country, right? Like, I'm not sure how about India, but I'll search. And I will be very sad about it. But if you see, this is how bad the situation is. But the general idea is you can deploy any complex application or any simple application just using dev file support. So if you see, the main idea here was just to have a workspace repository. Based on this dev file configuration, everything is getting deployed here onto the cluster.
When you're referring to component, there's some questions in the chat around what are you talking about when you're
Yeah,
when you're
which
saying multiple
components?
components.
Yeah.
It's such an overloaded term, but
That's
as
very
many
true
of our
statement,
terms
Serena.
are.
Okay, so yeah, I guess that might be a question from many folks. So the workflow here is basically the nomenclature. What we are following currently is OpenShift connector tool on VS Code or IntelliJ is supporting Odo 2.0. So Odo is a command line interface which allows you to run uh, or connect with different Kubernetes and OpenShift clusters. So the nomenclature inside that is you have a cluster. Inside the cluster, you have multiple projects, and multiple projects can have multiple applications. So inside one application, you can have multiple components. So by components, I mean those can be different files. Like it might be a Node.js component, it might be a Java component, or it might be a Python component. Now that component is basically defined or can be created using multiple ways. A simple Git repository can also be added as a component. And that component basically is having this odo configuration, which is going to map you this mapping, the project application and the name of the component. or it can be a simple folder which is running on your workspace. It should not be from a Git repository. It can be just simple folder on your workspace. So if you see, this is a simple workspace folder, which I have just created a .auto configuration on top of it. Or it can be as I mentioned, a binary folder, right? It can be a .zip or .tar file where we want to deploy that entire bundle on top of OpenShift. So that is also counted as a component right now. So these are the three different ways where you can create a component. And it's not necessary that we need to just be creating a component and then trying with OpenShift. So for example, if you have VS Code Quarkus extension. So let me just check out if I have a Quarkus extension. Okay, so VS Code Quarkus extension is already installed on my system. Basically, what I can do is I can just go ahead and generate a simple Quarkus project. And this will basically create a simple Quarkus project. It can be a simple endpoint project, or it can be maybe a Maven project, what I want to do. So I'll select Maven and I'll do, okay, group ID is this, Quarkus getting started, snapshot, package name, let me say hello world. And okay, and I'll just do this. And I have to select this, so let me. So the idea is I can create any project from any place and I can just deploy that into my OpenShift cluster. Okay, so once that is created, basically that is the same workflow as I did for Node.js dev file. That will be same as doing a Java dev file. So now if you go to this cluster and do list catalog components, so you're going to see a list of components which are readily available for Odoo 2.0, or you can say the dev file support which we have. So if you see the screen, so if you see, these are the basically the default registries which we have for Odoo, where whatever we are supporting currently, it can be a Java application for Quarkus or a Spring Boot or a Maven, or it can be a Node, Python. So currently these dev files are only supported. And for the S2I images, whatever was supported previously is still there, like Java, .NET, Golang, Ruby, Python. These are the specific supports which we are definitely trying to integrate more dev file support in coming releases. So that will be definitely there. And yep. And one more thing, what you want to mention was that if you see here, so the new URL and new storage command are also same across the dev file support or the S2I support. So the idea is the experience what we had when we wanted to deploy any S2I source to image components will be same when we are trying to deploy any dev file component. So that experience is not going to change. That experience is going to be same. The only added advantage is now users have a default deployment method using dev files, and that is supported in the latest version of the extension. I do not see the chats anymore, so I don't know if they have any specific questions.
Yeah, we were just,
We're-
one of the
we're
things is
handling
what frameworks are supported. And I think that command that you just ran was showing that, right? So this is a list of currently supported frameworks, and that will continue to grow.
Yeah.
So from this list, I would probably say component maps from a developer perspective to runtime component or runtime language that you might use. So you might have multiple Node.js microservices. So you might be using the Node.js component multiple times, depending. Does that make sense to folks in the both on the stream and in chat, hopefully?
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me. And
it also,
go ahead.
Yeah, it also allows you to select different versions of that Node.js. For example, right now, if I have Node.js, you can create a component on Node.js 10, 11, 12, whatever your application supports. So it's just not the runtime that it only supports Node.js. It is also specific to a version of Node.js also.
Mhm.
And similar goes for any other runtime.
Yeah, PHP, Python, the whole nine
Yeah.
yards. Yeah.
So
There's a question in chat. Do you have a link to the code base you're using? Like, is that public anywhere that you could share with us?
yes, and there's a link of the code base. And if you guys are using extension and you have any issues, there's also a report extension issue on GitHub action on the UI itself. So you can just directly open it. And once you open it, it will basically lead you to the GitHub issue here.
Nice.
But yeah, but the extension is, this is the GitHub URL which we have. And this is also mentioned on the VS Code Marketplace list where we have the repository link. So user who are downloading it from VS Code Marketplace can directly see the list, repository link and just try it out. So we are always looking for more feedback and more scenarios from the developer community that do we need to improve on something and how we need to improve the experience. So this will be a really nice way if someone wants to provide any specific feedback or any issues which they encountered during working with extension.
Mohit, do you know if we have like a dev file launcher or anything, like something you can embed in your GitHub README where people could click and then that would try to open it in VS Code or something like that?
That would be cool.
That's my next step. Don't just give me a link to the repo. Give me the link that I could click on to open it in VS. That's what I want next. But you know.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Mohit, people are asking for the code to your sample application with the COVID, data and everything, right? Like that's what they're asking for. I already dropped the link to the VS Code OpenShift tools repo.
Yeah, I'll provide that link too.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm curious how if you want to try to show this in OpenShift console, could we possibly try to see if that works, or is that too risky of a demo today?
We can definitely try because if you see, we also have this Kubernetes view which is supported with this extension. So if you see, this is the view which is supported. And if you see, this is my OpenShift cluster which is running. So it has been highlighted with OpenShift logo and the other Kubernetes logos because that is how it is. So if you expand it, and if you go to nodes, and not nodes, I should go to, yeah. So if you go to image streams, I think that should list down. Okay. Yeah, so let me just switch my project, which I have not done because currently I was in default project. So my project name was, what was the name of my project? Great. Twitch demo. So I'll go back to here. So this is the extra feature which we have with the Kubernetes extension where you can automatically switch between different projects which we are running. So Twitch demo is my current project. So it is loaded. Okay. And now let me just switch to workloads. So if you see, these are the different scenarios which are there for the deployment configs, and it will be same for the different pods which are running or for different build configs or different deployment configs which are there on the cluster, the Kubernetes view. But if you go here and open console dashboard, that will basically lead us to the dev console UI. I need to see what this should be the username and password, but that should be fine. I need to have username and password. Okay.
See, the demo has gone on seamlessly without a hitch. So now we're going to see if it can continue.
Here's going to be the problem. Yeah. We're just going to keep pushing the limit of this demo until something breaks, right? Like that's the goal here.
Well, yeah, what the heck? Show all the end-to-end scenarios, right? We can.
I hope it works. It should work because there is the experience is very seamless. So I'm very much hopeful that it will work,
Yeah.
and it is. So awesome. So if you see, this basically the application was deployed on OpenShift 4.6. So we're trying to deploy on the latest cluster. And if you go to, okay, I'll skip the tour.
Nishant just asked a good question for you, Ryan, in chat. Unrelated question. How do firms assign Kibana access to teams that need access to
Yeah, so if you
logs?
see, we have the topology view up
Check it out.
for
Yeah.
Wow,
this
look at that.
component.
Awesome.
And you can see the logs here. You can see different ports which are running. You can see which port it has been mapped to, and you can directly open the URL from this route. It will be the same application. So yeah, the idea is basically you can directly from your VS Code editor, you can directly switch to your OpenShift Dev Console, and you can see all the scenarios which are available on Dev Console seamlessly. You can go ahead and check the builds, and if you can check the okay, yeah, this way. So yeah, I think it worked, and it the experience is pretty much seamlessly true. If we
Yeah.
have,
Awesome. Thanks for trying that out.
yeah,
Awesome.
I am hoping.
I was
So,
just going to say too, like when you were
this-
talking about components, essentially when you were talking about component, it also kind of relates to the deployment or deployment config that ends up getting shown in topology. I
Yes.
think that's another way to think about it when you're looking at the visualization.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So if you see, I
it's-
also had a previous node application which was running on my cluster. If I look into that, and that will also be seamlessly available on the Dev Console side, and that is there. If I open it again, it has a different UI, but the idea is you can deploy any, as I mentioned, any application on top of OpenShift. It works. So the use case for this UI was to just see a weather. So for example, okay, let's say Paris. I hope it will work, but let's see. Okay, awesome. So this is the current weather in Paris. So
Mist. Ew. Sounds like a miserable day in Paris right now.
yeah, I guess so. Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, so whatever scenarios which you try to, as a developer, you try to do it on your editor, be it VS Code, be it IntelliJ, and you try to create your components, deploy in OpenShift without leaving your editor, are the same experience you can see on the Dev Console side. So the idea is you just have to, on the cluster, you have to right click and you have to open console dashboard, and that will basically lead you to this view.
Perfect. Thanks again
Easy.
for doing that.
I guess.
So someone says
Yep.
it's actually 5 degrees in Paris. So your app might have old data. Shocking.
Yep. Basically, it's an open API which I'm trying to hit. So maybe the API we need to just check whether that gives the correct data or not.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It does say well, this is all in Fahrenheit, 52 light rain. So switch it to Celsius.
I'm not sure what's currently in my city, so let me check.
Yeah, this is saying like Paris is at like 12. If I'm doing my math
says
right.
23.5 and my, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Okay.
my phone also says 24. So yeah, it's more or less same. Okay. So yep, I think that is what the main end goal of having this release was. We are going to support dev file, and we are also going to support any Kubernetes cluster with OpenShift cluster. So it's just no more just OpenShift cluster. It is any Kubernetes cluster, any OpenShift cluster will be supported by this extension. You can deploy applications on using dev file or using source to image, any scenario which the developer wants to do it. And you can run Red Hat Code Ready containers directly from your IDE without leaving the editor, and create a local version of OpenShift. So these three are the highlights of this release, and I think we are looking to improve it more in the upcoming releases. So stay tuned, I guess.
Awesome. question in chat, is it possible to work with the connector and ODO together? I think the connector is using ODO, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, the idea is basically whatever experience Odoo has, the same experience will be provided to the developers through the IDE support, because I'm assuming that people prefer sometimes using IDs to do different type of applications.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever experience we have for Odoo will be same for using the same extension. And this extension is also available on Red Hat Code Ready workspaces. So
Right.
if some developer wants to use Red Hat Code Ready workspaces, the extension is available there, and it will have the same experience there. So that way, the overall end-to-end experience using different IDs is going to be same when we are saying that OpenShift connector integrates with different clusters and supports different dev file and store images. So that will be true.
So there's a question also around a link to dev file references and tutorials. I'm looking to see if that's on odo.dev.
Yeah, I wouldn't
I don't know if
where
we
the
have
dev file
anything.
stuff would be yet.
I'm not sure if it's available yet. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe Steve might also know on
Yeah, Steve,
chat,
is there like a repo
possibly?
somewhere we can point folks to with examples maybe?
And again, since Odo 2.0 is recently released, it might just be kind of still in progress. We'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, we are also trying to have a new blog out for this extension. So maybe we will also try to include this in the blog also, so that people can find it handy.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
I've been busy with KubeCon, but I fully intend on updating the Odo 2 learning scenario on learn.openshift.com. That's still Odo 1.0 currently. But that's should be updated relatively soon. I did a test the other day where I pulled down the Odo 2 binary and dropped it into the demo and followed along using Odo 2 against the older cluster, but we're going to get it upgraded to a newer cluster version in that demo environment. So that'll be in the next couple weeks, I think.
Beautiful.
And we should have a nice example repo in here. I'm not in that update. I'm not sure. This COVID tracker was really cool. I haven't found the link to that repo yet. I was trying to troll through Mohit's commits on GitHub, but it doesn't look like he's been contributing on that specific repo. So I wasn't able to track it down that way. But we'll try to get a link for y'all.
Yep. And even the idea what we have for the next releases is we'll also support some starter components. For example, you can directly create a Node.js component or a Java component, and that will have the starter repositories mentioned. So we're also trying to work on that, and hopefully we'll have the support for that. This COVID-19 tracker example was is on GitHub. It was just a simple application I just wanted for the demo purpose, so that we can demo that it doesn't depend upon the complexity of the app. It basically depends on how it is easier for developer to test out on OpenShift. So, yep, I'll paste the link to the repo in the chat so that folks can try it out. And we're also going to have the starter packages soon, so that will be really cool.
Awesome. Cool. So what challenges might people hit with this connector? I mean, it's relatively simple to set up, but have you seen people hit any like roadblocks or bumps on the road kind of along the way setting it up? I have the curse of knowledge, so that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, there might be some challenges. For example, when we're trying to deploy any component on OpenShift, there might be scenario that the deployment configs are not getting created properly, or even the build configs are not getting created. So when these Kubernetes resources are not there on the cluster, then the app doesn't work seamlessly. We have to undeploy and try to push the components again. So that is one of the challenge which we have figured out that it might be there for some users. but that's not so consistent. That is just for few users. So I think overall we are trying to expand the interface, trying to include operator hub scenario into the extension also, where users can see the different list of operators which are currently installed in your cluster, and what are the other operators which you can also install on your cluster. So that is also in discussion phase currently, and we're trying to see the feasibility of it into the extension and try to implement that. So that will also be one of the cool features where users can directly install any operator on top of their cluster and just start using it directly from your IDE.
That's awesome.
So that is there.
All right. I am looking through questions. I think we got them all answered.
Yeah, we got a couple from YouTube that I've been trying to respond in Twitch chat, and I don't know if they're getting my replies. Probably not.
They probably are. Let me
okay.
Let me double check though, because it could be disconnected somehow. Yes,
Well,
the service we use should aggregate chat together, but while I pop
Okay.
over there, go ahead and jabber
Cool.
amongst
We had
yourselves.
one that was kind of off topic given today's discussion, but we're happy to have it anyway. Someone was asking about access to logging and granting specific teams access to logs. It kind of depends on which logs they're looking to access, I would say, as a short answer to that. One option would be enabling that team with a Prometheus operator. You could make sure that's available cluster wide if everyone wants to use it, or install it just in a namespace specific to them. And then they should have their own logging infrastructure available via that operator.
Okay, and there was a question I missed apparently. Hang on.
Yeah, there's a question. Where's the configuration for choosing the cluster to which you're deploying with the connector?
Ooh.
CRC or otherwise?
Okay, so the idea is you are connected to one instance of the cluster at one point of time. So if, say, for example, you're connected to this cluster and you need to change, so there is an action item here, which is like login into the cluster. And if you click on that, basically it will prompt you that you're already connected to a cluster. Do you want to switch it? So if you see, you're already logged into the cluster. Do you want to switch to a new? I said yes. And let me just back.
Very nice.
Yeah, so now you can basically decide that do you want to log in using credentials or do you want to log in using token? Once you say, okay, I want to log in using credentials. So this will basically list down all the clusters which you have previously connected to. And this mapping is being taken from your kubeconfig file. So if your kubeconfig file basically has this entry, this will be shown up here. So if you have a cluster already there, you just provide the credentials directly. Or for example, I have my code-ready containers running. So I'll just use that API.csc testing. And I have to provide the kubeadmin as a user. And let me just see what's the pass. So if you see, the password is already present here. So the extension allows you to do two things. First is it will ask when you provide the password for the first time, it will ask you whether you want to save the password or not. If you say yes, it basically saves the password in encrypted format using a node module known as keytar. So that saves it in encrypted format, so that once you try to log in the second or the next iterations, you did not manually again enter the password. It will already be stored. You just have to say yes. And now if you see, it says log into the cluster, it will try to log into the cluster. And now you're successfully logged in into code-ready containers instance. So this way you can switch between different clusters, and once you have switched between different clusters, you can deploy your components or application directly on that cluster also. So that is how it works.
Cool. Couple questions here. Does a tool exist to transform dev file 1x to 2x? I'm not sure about that one. No. Okay.
No, we do not do any transformation currently for any dev file 1.x to 2x.
And does any linting occur to assist with verifying the file is correct? Do you have like a dev file linter? It's just YAML, right? Or how is it?
Yeah, we do not have a specific linter for dev file because basically if your VS Code has a linting for YAML files to just check if something is right or wrong.
So install YAML lint and you're off and running, yeah.
Yep. So that is how it is done. So no specific linter for dev files, but yeah, basically it's a YAML configuration. So that should be working out of
Sufficient.
the box.
Yeah. And then will it work with vanilla Kates?
Yes. Now it will work with vanilla Kubernetes.
Yeah, as you saw, like when Mohit went to the view, I forget which view it was. Oh, actually, just click the Kubernetes logo above the OpenShift connector.
Yeah. So if you see,
Yeah, you can
these
see
are the
all
different
of his
projects.
clusters are right there, and he can log into any of them, including his Minikube one, right? Like right there from the
Yep.
IDE. So yeah, you would have no issues running this with Kates. AKS, I'm assuming, would even work, right? Like it's Kubernetes primitives. So if it's Kubernetes native, it's going to work, right? And that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, and that's a major change what we had for this release. Now the vanilla Kubernetes is supported fully with dev file support. So that was one of the major improvements which we have. So
Super cool. I haven't tried it out on vanilla Kubernetes yet, but that is definitely on my list of things to try. If any of y'all out in the audience end up accomplishing that, definitely let us know in chat. Give us some feedback on how it worked for you.
Yeah.
Really cool stuff.
Or how it didn't work for you. We're
Yeah,
here for that
yeah.
too. Yeah.
Either way.
It's not always about the good on this channel. Sometimes there's problems. All right. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful work, Mohit. Like, this is awesome. I really appreciate you bringing this onto the channel today. Currently on IKS, said they'll give it a try. Okay, cool. That should work.
Yep.
Yeah. So, Serena, anything else? You wanted
I
to
think-
mention the
yeah.
console competition again?
I just wanted to mention that one more time. So I left a link in the chat for the registration form. So again, that is a showcase the best OpenShift web console customizations using the current supported mechanisms for OpenShift 4. So I think we've had a few shows on that so far. We're going to have another one. I think it is in 2 weeks. Is going to be another one where we talk about some of the entries that we've gotten. And then on December 1st, we're going to have a live show showing like the top entrants as determined by the committee and allowing the people online to do voting for the top 3. So keep your eyes open and please join. I know we've got a number of registrants already, but we'd love, the more we get, the better. So,
yeah, there's a lot of folks out there doing some interesting things to their consoles. So like, we'd love to see it.
yeah.
Was that,
this
was
is
that
also
last
a great
week's?
way. Oh, sorry.
We had a really slick, if you missed it, I can't recall whether it was last week or not, but we had a really nice demo of how to customize the console. So if you missed that show, definitely take a look for that video on YouTube or on Twitch.
Was that the debacle show, or
Is
is that where we broke all the clusters?
My debacle?
No, not your debacle, just where we broke all the clusters, but
Yeah.
eventually got a good working cluster. Yeah.
I think there was also Ollie also had one. I think there's been a couple of them that we've done it. Yeah. It's been
Yeah,
pretty
there's a
good,
few.
yeah.
I'll grab the latest one and drop
Yeah.
it in chat here if I can find it in time.
I think one of the goals too is just is not only show us what you can do, but also let the community and other customers like see all the cool things that are being done, so that sharing
Sharing
and
is caring.
Exactly. So, and also I think one of the follow-ups after that is like, what are customers and our users and the community really looking for going forward, and trying to gather some more of those requirements too for people. So
I think
all good.
this was it. Yes. Okay, let me drop this. I believe this was the right one. Yeah, customizing. Find the chat. Drop it in Restream chat. Here's the previous episode, everybody. And without further ado, if there's nothing else, let me double check chat. I know that y'all are on top of it, but
I think that's it. I think next
Paris
week
has a question.
Let's see.
Is it possible to use kind for development and then go to OpenShift using the same dev file? I believe so. Yeah, it should work in theory. Unless you're using some like OpenShift specific things that don't exist in kind, or if you're doing that, then that's not going to work. But otherwise, it should work, right? Because
Yeah,
Kubernetes
theoretically, There may be some differences in the security model between those two environments. So if you're running things in local dev where every process is run as a root process, then you may have some surprises further downstream in your release pipeline. But that's all cluster configuration and security, not necessarily about this. But assuming the clusters are configured consistently, ideally, yes, this should work. So we'll see. I think
TM.
it is a future topic. So we'll see. It's
okay, cool.
Awesome. And so I think next week, heads up for folks that are not in the US, it is election day next Tuesday.
Yes.
And so we are taking a break on the show next Tuesday, but we will be back the following week.
And so next Tuesday is going to look a little different on the channel. I will be out. I'll be out voting, and then just staying away from the deluge of information that'll happen after that, and not being in front of a computer is a good, healthy way to get away from that for me. So but we will have DevNation that day. We will have an OpenShift Commons that day. So I think we're having OpenShift Commons that day. I forget. But just stay tuned to the public streaming calendar, which I'll drop a link to right now. And you will have the latest and greatest in your calendar as well by subscribing to that calendar. So hit that page, go down to the bottom right. There should be a little plus sign next to the Google Calendar logo, assuming they didn't change it with all the logo changes. And you can add that to your calendar and get reminders whenever we're on the show. Or you can just pick an individual show and say, subscribe to this show and add that to your calendar. So whatever works for you, please have at it. We welcome you back anytime. So without any other questions in the chat and without any other demos to be done, thank you all for joining today. Really appreciate Ryan, Mohit, Serena, everybody sitting here. I just listed that in order as no particular priority. And really appreciate everybody in chat today. Chat was lively, so I always appreciate that. We're glad and happy to answer your questions. And stick around, top of the hour, so in 8 minutes-ish, we will have an OpenShift Commons briefing on 3-scale and API management. So that'll be fun, as well as an operator demo. So that's always good too. So stick around, and we'll see you here in a few minutes. Same place. See you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye. See you.